All right, let's cover lesson 9, percent word problems. This is a very short lesson, so let's just get going with it here. These are percent word problems. You can do them however you feel like it. I'll show you one method, and if you have a better method that you like, you can use that one. So example 1 says the wood nymphs and the maids gambled and frolicked before the banquet began. If 70% of those present were wood nymphs, 120 maids were present, how many wood nymphs came to the banquet? So we don't know the total. One way that you can do this is, I like to draw a diagram. You don't have to do this, but if it helps you, then use it. So we have two different types of, I guess they're people, wood nymphs and maids. So we're going to divide our circle into segments. We know that 70% were wood nymphs. So I'm going to make the bigger part of the circle here. This would be 70%. 70% were the wood nymphs. So there's the wood nymphs. And we know that there's 120 maids. So I'm going to put them over here. We have 120 of them, 120 maids. We don't know how many wood nymphs there are. But we know that 70% of wood nymphs. So that means to complete the circle, there would be 30% of the total is the maids, would be the maids. So we would say 30%, so we change it in decimal, 30% of the total equals 120. So we would just divide that. We would get the total number of people. How many wood nymphs came to the banquet? Well, we have the total number of people would be 400. So we would just take 400 minus 120. So we would get 280 were wood nymphs. Okay, so the circle just helps us to be able to, we need two pieces of information to do the problem. We have the maids and we have the 70%, but they need to be in the same part of the circle for this to work. So that's just one way to do that kind of problem, is with a circle diagram. Now the next one, we're talking about percents that are over 100. And I do this one a little bit differently than that. So let's just see. And again, if you, most kids at this point have a way that they do percents. So I don't want to mess with your way, but I will show you the way that I do it. The harvest was cornucopian, as it was 120% greater than it was last year. If the yield was 140,800 bushels, how many bushels were harvested last year? So the way I set this up is I say, let's X equal last year. This year's was 120% greater than last year. So we have last year's plus 120%. Now that's how we'd move our decimal point over 2 places to get to percent of last year, is going to equal this year's yield, which is 140,800. We want to figure out what last year's was. So last year was 100%, then we had 120 more percent. So we're talking about 220%. I always set it up as 2 parts, but in the book they just do 220 every time, or 240, or whatever the percent is. If it's 140%, if it would be 250%, then you would do 350 when you add it to last year's total. So equals 140,800, and you divide and you get last year's total was 64,000 bushels. So I like to say, if you have words in the problem, you should put words in your answers. They don't always do that, but I think that's a good practice. So that's it, guys, for lesson 9.